Let's talk to Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, who's a former commander of UK and NATO chemical, biological and nuclear forces. Good to see you, Hamish, as always. In terms of this ground invasion, which is going to happen, I mean, there's no doubt this is going to happen, and it's going to happen in force. But nevertheless, in these very congested, built-up areas, that must be an incredibly dangerous situation for those forces moving in.
Yes, good morning. Urban warfare is the most challenging military operation that you can undertake. And as you can see in the pictures, it's incredibly built up, lots of high-rise buildings and very dense. And everybody's talking about the mass of civilians in the area and the chances of not just collateral damage of building, but more importantly, civilian casualties. We've seen, you've reported earlier, that special forces operations by the Israelis to rescue hostages, I mean, their special forces are really second to none. And I expect that will be the focus, these sort of precise operations to rescue hostages. And the second element to this, Israel's vow to destroy Hamas. Now, that is what is going to take the time, and that is why the Israelis are massing hundreds of thousands of infantry people, because they're going to have to go into northern Israel, northern Gaza to begin with, and really search every blade of ground, every building, and around every corner there will be booby traps and also terrorists. Now, I think it is a good idea to move the civilians south, however difficult it is, and I know Jan Egeland at the UN is calling this a war crime, which I'm not sure that's entirely correct. But to leave the Hamas fighters behind to face the Israelis strikes me to be the most humane thing to do. I expect once the Israelis have cleared northern Gaza, they will then try and move civilians back to the north, where it will be relatively safer, and conduct a similar operation in the south. But absolutely, this is horrifically difficult, horrifically challenging. They are looking for 30,000 Hamas fighters, we believe, within a population of 2.3 million in a very small area. So very, very challenging indeed. And everybody hopes that civilian casualties are minimised. And the second key element to this is the responsibility of the UK and the US and others in the region to prevent escalation, prevent Iran's proxy Hezbollah getting involved and Russia's proxy Syria getting involved. And so the British fleet moving to the East Mediterranean, I think, is a good thing for us to do to try and prevent this escalating beyond Israel.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you describe it that way, it shows what a massive operation it's going to have to be. But you also described how urban warfare is so incredibly dangerous for individual soldiers going in. And it's not just sort of urban warfare, it's almost guerrilla warfare, isn't it? Because we understand Hamas have always specialised in having a sort of network of underground tunnels, and we don't necessarily know where they are.
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, Hamas are hiding amongst the people. You know, they're not wearing uniforms with Hamas written on the back. The only way that the Israelis will be able to find them is when they are actually firing back at them. The other element to it that you quite rightly highlight are the tunnels. There are tunnels all over Gaza, which is what Hamas used to hide in, used to smuggle weapons in from all over the place. And the Israelis will have to go and clear them. You know, the most horrific type of operation you can imagine, underground, fighting in tunnels. But the Israelis do have specialist troops who are incredibly well trained to do this. But the underground war is even more horrific than the war above ground. But it's going to be really challenging, and undoubtedly there'll be many casualties on both sides. But unless Hamas gives itself up, which seems unlikely, it's clear to me, and I think everybody, the Israelis are absolutely determined to save their casualties and to neutralise Hamas.
Can we get your perspective on the civilian side of this, from a military perspective, from a man who knows what this is like? Because there's a lot of concern about the horrific crimes that we saw happen in Israel, but there is also obviously a lot of concern about civilians in Gaza and civilian casualties. And that is, I mean, it's rightly a concern. But in a war, there is always this, it's awful to say, but this collateral damage, isn't there? And nobody may want it. Is it something that, as a military man, you know, you would think we, as regrettable as it is, we just have to accept?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's civilian casualties are the absolutely desperate end of warfare. And in the military, certainly the British military, we always try and avoid civilian casualties, you know, at all costs. Unfortunately, civilians do get caught in the crossfire. Now, had Hamas not invaded Israel, had they not killed 1,300 Israelis, and, you know, I won't go into the horrific details of that, then this would not be happening. Now, you know, we are where we are, sadly. And unfortunately, when you have terrorists hiding amongst the people as they are here, unless the civilians is out of the north, then unfortunately people will get caught in this. This is not new. This has happened since, you know, the beginning of time. And, you know, we all wish there was no war and no fighting. We all wish we lived in eternal peace. But unfortunately, that is just not the case. And, you know, there are an awful lot of naive people around who do live in Wonderland, and that's great for them. Unfortunately, for the people of Israel and the people of Palestine, that is just not the case at the moment. And the Israelis stated our aim to save their hostages and to neutralise Hamas is going to mean, sadly, that civilians on both sides are going to be killed and injured. We would all wish that was not the case.
And in your expert opinion, though it may be very difficult for you to say, how long is this operation going to take? How long will this war last?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to take a long time. When usually Israeli raids are short and sharp, and these sort of conflicts over the last sort of decades or so have taken a few weeks. Now, for Israel to clear Gaza from top to bottom, as I've mentioned, they have really got to look under every blade of grass, clear every single building, and there are thousands of buildings and some of them quite high. You know, this is probably going to take weeks rather than days. It really depends what sort of resistance that they come up against, and also they are trying absolutely to reduce civilian casualties. If there was no concern about civilian casualties, they would flatten the place in a couple of days and go through it. But in trying to eke out these 30,000 Hamas terrorists, it is going to take time. So I can't put an absolute figure on it, but I'd say weeks rather than days.
OK. Colonel Hamish to Bretton-Gordon, really appreciate your expertise and your time this morning. Thank you.